And if we take a look through the magnification glass of CS Track, we can think about a few questions. So why are people dedicating their free time for something like that, for classifying stuff? And of course, this is one of the very basic questions, but there are other questions that we can still ask. What are the organizations behind citizen science projects and how are they connected? I mean, think of, there are some organizations that are not primarily running such projects, but they are, let's say, disseminating things. They are really strengthening the backbone of citizen science. So think of a hidden layer of organizations that are really strengthening citizen science. And can we find those organizations? But also, what is actually the research about? If you think about, for example, the chimpanzee project, intuitively, what would you say? Is it a biology project? Is it about anthropology? Is it maybe even about crowdsourcing itself? Are they reinventing things in that field? So there are a lot of perspectives that you can take on the research areas that are covered by such projects. And we could ask what are those research areas and topics people are thinking about there. And if you take a look, for example, to Twitter, what are important topics in the field of citizen science people are talking about? So those are some driving questions that we are facing in CS Track and that we are trying to answer using analytics tools. And we, of course, developed also a framework of what we want to do and how we want to proceed there. Of course, the first part, the indicators and questions, you just saw that 4, of which we can answer 3 of them, at least quite straightforward with our tools. Then we have to think about data sources and types. What kind of data are we collecting? What kind of data are we analyzing? And of course, on which scale? Can we do that for every CS project? Can we do it for just a certain set of projects? And then we have to think about the methods. If we want to retrieve particular results, which method do we take? And we have to respect the scaling, of course, as well. So when we think about what we want to analyze, there are certain, let's say, types of data, and we call it the Trinity of Analytics, that consists of 3 different main entities of things that we can analyze. First of all, the processes. For example, if you have data streams or something like that, a series of time-stamped events that you could put into an action log file, then you can apply, for example, methods of pattern or mining or process mining, or even sequence analysis. For example, if you want to identify certain action sequences that typically occur. For example, you know that from every portal you have those login, logout sessions. You could think about when do people drop out, for example, in online courses. You could make some rules or anything like that. And the kind of data that you have represented there is typically something like A classified B at 12 p.m. So you have the timestamp, you have an event, you have some kind of verb and object in that. Another type of data that we have is, for example, user-generated content or user-generated artifacts, that you have collections of objects that are created through, for example, the citizen science activity. If you think about the chimpanzee example again, then you might have, for example, a specific case description, a forum message, anything that a user sends out that represents any kind of knowledge or any kind of unstructured things. That is called an artifact of that activity. And you could apply methods of information extraction on that or computational content analysis. And this is one of the main things that we will do today. Another thing that also occurs, that is relational data, for example, based on social networks. If you have, for example, a forum or a forum message, then it might be something like A replies to B. And you could really use that to map this to a network. You have the node A and you have the node B, and you have a relation in between that. And if you have data like that, you could easily build networks and then apply methods of network analysis, for example, based on centrality measures that indicate, for example, a level of expertise or maybe even some kind of prestige, that you could identify very important actors in a social network. So what we do today, Bren, do you have a question?
I was going to say, what do you mean by no inherent time under social networks?
Sorry, that was a bit quick. Because if you have a social network, then you don't have any time data usually in that. What people do for dynamic networks is they create time slices. So that is basically, for example, if you have 4 years of data, you might want to create 4 time slices. Then you separate the data, partition it into those 4 time slices. But still, if you have a network data, like A relation to B, then there's no time anymore. So the social network analysis methods don't work with time. If you have those different time slices, they're completely independent. You cannot say anything about the time, except that this is in a certain time window.
Okay.
But if you have, for example, those action sequences, that is very important that you have time. Victoria?
Thanks, Sven. I think this is sort of following on from Brandon's question, which is in some cases, and I think your own description of content and relations was indicating this, but so like on the Zooniverse platform with the talk forum functionality, some of the exports, the export would, I think, give you the time of the exchange and sort of, yeah, is it important to pick apart when something is content versus, well, and I see, it's a Venn diagram and it relates, but with relations, sorry, I'm not being super clear, but I guess what I'm trying to ask is there's some things that are very social that are also about sharing information and creating content. And is it important at any point to like distinguish or pull those apart in your analysis?
Exactly, and sometimes it's very important that you mix up those methods in order to triangulate a problem. And a funny thing is that particularly for Zooniverse, we really mixed up the analysis of the talk pages using some kind of analysis of knowledge building discourse. So really the knowledge creation, knowledge building, but also in conjunction with social network analysis. And we just submitted that to a conference. So that was actually working on the chimpanzee project. This is for us also a prominent and interesting example. The whole Zooniverse platform is quite interesting for us. And I think that for this platform, you could integrate all those methods, because you could also use participation data that is time-stamped as well. So you could really, in this Venn diagram, really go into the center of this diagram and combine all those methods. And of course, this is very important because not all those methods cover all aspects. So if we say that social network analysis does not cover time, for example, and also not the real coherence of on the content level, then you need to triangulate there.
Thank you.
Okay, so the next point is, how do we scale those analytics? Can we apply everything for every scale of projects? And we had some kind of typology in the CS-Track project. We call it the level of analytics. And we have those 3 different levels. And for example, on the micro level, we see individual analysis. So for example, if we take a specific project and analyze that in depth, for example, the chimpanzee project, we might also apply very complex workflows and manual pre-processing. Sometimes you need manual power because you cannot decide everything on the automatic level. You will see that later on. So that was one of the cases where we really extracted networks of the whole discourse. We would say that this is a micro level because we cannot really scale that to a larger corpus of projects, because this is a very intense task that needs a lot of manual efforts. On the meso level, we would say that this is a scale where we, let's say, have a part of the CS landscape. So analytics that are applicable to a larger collection of platforms, but not to all. For example, if we rely on textual descriptions of projects, we need to have that in our database. And this is really one of the things that we will see throughout this workshop. This is more on this meso level. For example, assigning research areas to projects. So if we ask ourselves which kind of research area is covered by chimpanzee, then this is one of the answers to that. on the macro level, we see larger scale analytics that really potentially also investigate in projects that we do not yet have in our corpus of data. And this is where we can place the highest degree of automation. For example, if we have Twitter data, for example, Twitter is something that is not really in our control, that where we have the public involved, and we can certainly have all the CS projects that are not under our magnification glass, and we still could dig into the data and find that. And we did that, for example, with a specific data collection tool that is called Lingo. And we captured Twitter data in the field of citizen science and really discovered a lot of things that we had not really on our view yet, on our radar. So those are the 3 levels, and we had the 3 different types on beforehand. Now we have, let's say, a view of what we can do.